There's something wrong
No.
there. No, it's just this. Where should I aim this? There we go. What do I mean by positive feedback loops? I mean people and things that reinforce each other. And so a key to success is recognizing, nurturing, and writing those positive feedback loops. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. And finally, any company, no matter how modest, can be evolved and scaled into a large company if you want. I won't say much about scalability in this talk, but there are 2 chapters on that in the book. So those are some of the ideas that I think you'll find are fresh. So why did customer sat survive when so many other companies failed? We certainly didn't have more in the way of resources than other companies did. In its entire history, the company only raised $2.94 million. I absolutely don't think we were smarter than other management teams. If I had to boil it down to just 2 factors, I would say it was these. Number 1, we cared more deeply about our company than other management teams did, about all aspects of it, about the coolness of our products, about the relationship we had with our customers and with each other more than other management teams did. And 2, we stuck with it long. As I mentioned, it was another 7 years before the company was acquired. Many other companies just gave up and threw in the towel before then. So in short, it was this combination, in my view, of passion and perseverance that got us through. We hear a great deal about passion today. Every business book talks about passion. That's starting to get boring. Some business books also talk about perseverance. That's becoming more interesting. Nobody is talking about how the 2 reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. Passion is an attitude. Perseverance is a behavior. And in many aspects of our lives, our attitudes and behaviors reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. If you just stick with something long enough so that you start to like it and then get better at it and then start to love it, that's an example of perseverance driving passion. Conversely, you know how, if you're already passionate about an activity, the hours can go by like minutes when you're engaged in that activity. That's an example of perseverance driving passion. And so you can see how the 2 reinforce each other and form, that's an example of passion driving perseverance. You can see how the 2 reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. And if you can think of any realm of your life where you've experienced that positive feedback between passion and perseverance, any realm, that might be in sports or travel or scholarship or electronics or gadgets or you name it, fashion, that could be a really good area to consider for starting a company. I like to say that passion and perseverance are broadly akin to the north-south and east-west axes if you're trying to climb this mountain. If you can only go along one axis, it may be difficult or impossible to find a path that takes you to the top. But if you have the flexibility to go along either axis, you can find a way that will take you all the way to the top. That's broadly analogous to how passion and perseverance reinforce each other. Why is passion so important in a startup? Let me give you 3 reasons. Number 1, it gives you a time to market advantage, because in the areas that you're passionate about, you are trying all of the features and functions of the products and services in that product area, and you're discovering the limitations of those products and services that are currently there. Some of those limitations will be unsatisfied customer needs, and so you will discover them sooner than other people will. 2, it gives you staying power to break through obstacles. You'll encounter all kinds of obstacles like the ones I just related during the dot-com bust. Passion keeps you going through them. And 3, it's contagious, your passion is, to other members of your team, so there's a multiplicative effect. Now, sometimes I hear it said or asked, what if my passions aren't very business-like? What if they're long hot baths, kittens, and comic books? Those don't seem very businesslike, do they? Well, even in these areas are an infinite number of unsatisfied customer needs. So people like to read, listen to the music, and watch videos when they're in the tub, don't they? How about a floating waterproof case for my iPhone or my iPad so I can do those things in the tub? Kittens lose a lot of their cuddliness when they grow up to be adult cats, don't they? What if there were a diet or genetic therapy that would keep a kitten its entire life? There'd be a lot of demand for that, wouldn't there be? Comic books, the hugely successful trade show Comic-Con in San Diego, California, each year attracts 150,000 people. People dress up as their favorite comic book characters. It's a hugely profitable event. So it doesn't matter what your passions are, there will be unsatisfied customer needs in those areas. Now, I like to say that in your areas of passion and perseverance, there are only two things you need to start a company and make it a success: a real unsatisfied customer need and an advantage for satisfying those needs relative to others who might try to satisfy them. Well, there are tons of customer needs, even just in the areas that you're passionate about, and you have tons of advantages, whether or not you realize it. In a moment, we'll see more about that. But the two are like puzzle pieces, and they have to fit together. So it's largely a process of search to find the two puzzle pieces that fit together the best. That's where you're most likely to be successful. So we start by finding a whole bunch of the left puzzle pieces the customer needs. We test them to make sure they're real and unsatisfied. Those are the ones we're interested in. And then we turn to the other puzzle piece. We inventory all of your resources, a subset of which will be applicable to any particular customer need, and a further subset of which will be advantages relative to others who are trying to satisfy that need. And then we bring the two together and we look for the two puzzle pieces that fit each other the best. That's where we're most likely to be successful, and that's the business that we select, refine, launch, and scale up. And in fact, the 10 steps of the book, this is an iterative process. It's constantly changing because new needs are constantly being created, old needs are constantly being satisfied, plus your own resources are constantly changing. You're gaining new experience all the time. You're gaining new team members, new skills that you're learning or acquiring, prototypes of products and services, satisfied customers that you've served who can give you good testimonials. All of these are among your resources. So you can see it's a very dynamic, continuously evolving process. And if you look at the 10 steps of the process, which are laid out there, you can see that they follow those 10 steps, and you can see them here again in the table of contents of the book. Well, I'm going to say a few words about first the customer need, then your resources, and then about some of the other chapters in the book. So you'll notice that I start with the customer need. Why is that? Well, I like to say I started my first company, Decisive Technology, in 1992 with a real cool technology for which there was no customer need. And it took me 6 to 9 months to let go of that idea and evolve it into something for which there was a real customer need, namely the ability to do surveys on the internet. That product became a hit, Decisive Survey, and the company is part of Google today. So it really does work. Start with a real unsatisfied customer need. That way you will know you really are addressing the customer need. The technology, that cool technology that you like so much, and if there are any engineers in the room besides me, we engineers so easily can become enamored with a new technology. You may not even need the technology to address the customer need. There may be an easier or better way to do it that doesn't use that technology. So start with the need first. Now, whatever you come up with for that need, I want you to think big and supersize it, because that's going to guide you. But There's a wrong way and a right way to think big. And I first want to tell you about the wrong way, which is the way I hear about most of the time from entrepreneurs. And that is, we're going to get 10% of $1 billion market, and we're going to be a $100 million company. Well, that's really unimpressive. That doesn't tell me anything about how you're going to do that. How are you going to compete with those billion-dollar companies that are already serving that market? And how are you going to carve out that for yourself? Here's a better way to think big and supersize your idea, and that is step by step by upsizing either the customer set or the need. I like to say that there are two parts to a customer need: the customer and the need, and be able to articulate both of those. So we'll see some examples of upsizing either the customer set or the need that those customers have. Think of it as a bowling pin game. As you know, when you bowl, you let the ball go and it knocks over first the first pin. The first pin knocks over the next two pins. The next two pins knock over the next three pins, and so forth. Think of each market segment that you can address as one of those bowling pins. Out of all the market segments that make up that $1 billion overall market, which one can you knock over the most easily? And then once you've knocked over that one, you have satisfied customers, you have the technology that you've developed to address that market and so forth. What's the next pin that you can most easily knock over and so forth? Draw all that out. Here's some examples. It can be done in a number of different ways. For example, this one is done by geography, where we start out with the South of Market area of San Francisco and then expand from there to San Francisco and then adjacent cities. Or it might be done by industry. We start out in technology and expand to financial services, retail, and so forth. Or it might be done by department in the large enterprise if it's a business-to-business sale. So in this example, we start out in customer service and then expand from there to sales, to marketing, manufacturing, and so forth. Here's a real example. 2 Degrees Food makes fruit and nut bars. They created this table with customer needs on one axis and customers on one axis and needs on the other. And they made their way to number 3 there, which is when Whole Foods started distributing their fruit and nut bars. Whole Foods is a major supermarket chain in the US. And so as best they could determine, this would be the path that they would take to flesh out that entire larger square or rectangle of market opportunity. And you can see that if you know after you're at number 3 that you're going to go to 4 and 5, that's really useful, because some of the decisions that you have to make when you're at number 3 will be clarified by and influenced by the fact that 4 and 5 is where you see yourself going next. So this is a very useful exercise and helps a lot of the decision making that you're making today. I would hasten to add that you have to update it frequently, because it's impossible to see very far into the future. Things will change. When you get to number 5, you realize you can't go to number 6 at all. After all, you have to go somewhere else. And so you have to keep updating this chart. But that's okay. It still is a useful exercise and still contains the best knowledge that you have about the future of your business at any time. Now, this is much more impressive to a potential investor, because it shows that you've not only segmented that overall larger market, but you've thought about which or what order you're going to address those segments in. And that shows the potential investor and your team that you've put a lot of thought into this. Think of that then as those are the bowling pins, those different segments, and adding together the different pins or segments of the overall market, you may well come up with 100 million like they did originally, but this shows a lot more thought and how you're going to do it, not just that you want to do it. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about customer need. Let me turn to the other puzzle piece, which are your advantages relative to others who might try to satisfy the same customer need. And for that, I want to take you back 400 years to Hyderabad, India. 400 years ago, near what is today Hyderabad, a very successful farmer with a very expansive and successful farm was approached by an ancient Buddhist priest. And the priest happened to mention to the farmer that whoever could find diamonds could become the wealthiest person in the world. And the farmer got really intrigued by that idea, couldn't stop thinking about it, and decided he wanted to be that guy. And so he assembled a team of experts who knew about diamond mining, bought the necessary mining equipment, sold his farm, and spent the next 20 years traversing the vast North African, Asian, and European continents in search of diamonds. He found none. And at the end of 20 years, he was penniless, afflicted, depressed, friendless. He was standing on a high peak overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. As he stood there, a huge wave came up, and in his utter desperation, he threw himself into that wave, disappeared beneath its foaming crest, and was never seen again. Meanwhile, the guy who bought his farm was tending to his fields. There was a stream that ran through those fields. He noticed an unusual black rock in one of those streams. He reached in, took it out. It was about the size of a baseball. It had an eye, what looked like an eye, that reflected all the colors of the rainbow. He thought that was unusual, so he put it in his pocket, brought it back to the farmhouse, put it down on a table, and forgot about it. Sometime later, that same ancient Buddhist priest who told the first farmer about diamonds stopped by for a visit. And when he did, he saw the stone and recognized it as a diamond in its original unprocessed form. Got very excited about it, said to the farmer, "Are there any other stones like that?" The farmer didn't know, so the two men rushed out to the fields and discovered they were covered with acres and acres of diamonds, tens of thousands of diamonds. That farm would become Golconda, near what is today Hyderabad, India, the most prolific diamond mine in history, from which the crown jewels of England, Germany, and many other heads of state were mined. If the first farmer had just realized all of the resources he already had, he would have been the wealthiest person in the world. Similarly, each and every one of us here has acres of diamonds, resources that we can apply to make our startups a success. And right now, I'm going to show you a way to inventory and catalog your acres of diamonds. I use the acronym STARS to remember. That stands for your skills, your technologies, your assets, achievements, relationships, reputation, and strengths, as in inner strength. And no matter where you are in life, whether you plan or want to start your own business or not, a very worthwhile exercise is to take out a big sheet of paper, put 7 columns on it, one for each of those words, put one word at the top, and then underneath each word, write down as many of those resources as you can think of that you have. If you wish, instead use an Excel spreadsheet and make 7 columns and do it that way. It's a good exercise to do with someone else because they will see resources in you that you don't see in yourself. Here's an example. The skills and technologies include those that you've learned both by formal training and those that you have picked up because you're passionate about those activities or things or topics. The assets include your physical, financial, and knowledge-based assets. Reputation, accomplishments are important because they help build your self-confidence. Relationships and reputation include both personal and professional relationships and how people know you. And finally, strengths include inner strengths, qualities that you've demonstrated, such as creativity, perseverance, ingenuity, passion, compassion, and so forth. Write them all down, even if they don't seem relevant to whatever business you might be thinking of starting, because we don't know at this early stage which of the resources on your chart you're going to be drawing on for your business. We use this chart in 4 different ways. Number 1, to assess the fit between you and each of the unsatisfied customer needs that you've identified. 2, to see where the gaps are, to see what additional resources you need to acquire to best satisfy that need. 3, to build your self-confidence. And as I've said, it's hard to build your own business. And so you'll have to build your confidence deliberately. And 4, to innovate. And innovation is largely a process of combining things we already know in novel ways. And this chart lays out what you already know, so you can use it as a vehicle for combining things. Well, I'm going to say more about these last 2 items right now. Building your self-confidence and innovation. And for building your self-confidence, the most important column on that chart is the last column, your inner strengths. As was mentioned by Luis, I had the privilege of serving as president of the MIT Alumni Association, got to work closely with many MIT faculty members. One of them is Professor Anne Graybill in Brain and Cognitive Science. Professor Graybill says, for example, that the only way to break a habit is to start a new habit to replace it. The brain, she tells us, is like an iceberg. That we're only consciously aware of about 10% of the messages that we get that come into our lives. The remaining 90%, we're not even aware of those messages. Something we saw out of the corner of our eye, something we overheard. But some of these messages are harmful or can be harmful to us. In particular, negative things about ourselves that we repeat again and again. The unconscious mind will hear those and at some point accept them as true, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the first point in this chapter of the book, which is called Growing Your Mind from the Inside Out, is never say anything negative about yourself. To be very clear, I don't care and I'm not concerned about what other people think about you. I'm concerned about what your most important audience thinks about you, namely your unconscious mind. Whenever a negative thought might creep into your mind, whatever it might be, no good at sports, no good at math, not good in social situations, think of a specific incident, no matter how small, where you did the opposite. If it was a social situation, you were the one to put everyone at ease. If it was the math, you were able to do it in your head. If it was a sport, you were the star at that time. Write down every detail of that specific incident, no matter how small. And if you have trophies or photos that remind you of it, put those in a prominent place and let that reality become your new reality for that. And let that squeeze the negative thoughts out of your mind. So that is one of the techniques for building your self-confidence in this chapter. Here's another technique. When I was in my mid-30s, I accepted the fact that I'm gay. Most people would not view that as an asset. I disagree. For me, it's been an asset in 5 different ways. Number one, when you're growing up gay, you know unambiguously, with absolute certainty, that at least some of the world's routine assumptions are wrong. People routinely assume that guys are attracted to gals and vice versa, don't they? But you know that it's not universally correct. And so growing up gay has helped me not necessarily accept the status quo. Think outside the box, and that's made me a better entrepreneur and executive and investor. 2, it wasn't socially acceptable to be openly gay when I was growing up, and so at least some of the energy I might have put into dating, I put into sports and studying and career instead. Today, 30 plus years later, I'm hugely enjoying the benefit of that early investment. Maybe I wouldn't have gone to MIT had I not been gay. 3, I'm not a minority in any sense that I can think of other than being gay. And so it has sensitized me to some of the challenges minorities face. 4, when people see I'm not trying to hide myself, my sexual orientation, they can see I'm being honest with them, and that helps build trust between us. And 5, I think it further conveys that I have strength in reserve if I can be open about the fact that I'm gay. Similarly, if there is some aspect of yourself that you genuinely cannot change, find a way to view it as an asset. Set the bar very high. Don't use this as an excuse to accept some aspect of yourself that you can change and would like to change. But if you genuinely cannot change it, if you can find a way to view it as an asset, it'll be hugely empowering for you as it was for me. And that aspect of yourself will become one of your strengths. A few years ago, I was giving this exact same talk to a classroom, an auditorium of undergraduates in Guatemala. And as I spoke to them, I noticed about halfway back in the auditorium, a young man gently made a fist and held it up against his chest like this. And at first, I thought it was some small gesture of agreement or support for what I was saying. But then, when I looked again, I could see he wasn't making a fist at all. His hand had no fingers on it. And I imagine he was saying, this I cannot change. This is my strength. So again, if there's some aspect of yourself you genuinely cannot change, find a way to view it as it will become one of your assets. How many people here use PowerPoint? Okay, well, all of us. Well, here's a PowerPoint tip. Add a kitten, cat, or puppy to your slide to make it more engaging. Yeah. Though this is not actually about the cat. It's about the point on the carpet above the cat that you can see that's pointed. I cannot lift up a carpet very high, can I? Unless I also lift up all the points around that point on the carpet. Well, we're all like the points on that carpet, aren't we? I can't lift up myself very high unless I also lift up the people around me. So even if I see just a glimmer of good judgment or perseverance or creativity in somebody else, letting them know that I see it helps build that quality in them, and also attracts good people to us, because people want to be around other people who build good qualities in them, and that elevates us to a position of leadership. So just as we saw, it's good for our unconscious minds to look for and find the good in ourselves, so is it with other people. Now, I promised that I'd show you how this tool can be used, the STARS chart, for innovation. And here's an example. The key is to look for an unsatisfied customer need that's some combination of the resources on your chart might satisfy. So in this case, somebody has skills in Spanish and translation, and they've worked in medical services, and that gives them the idea for automating the process of translating from one language to another for a doctor and a patient who don't both speak the same language. Or maybe it could be combining other resources to do same-day delivery of pharmaceuticals in your city. Of all the resources on your chart, the ones that are most useful for finding possible solutions to unsatisfied customer needs are your skills and technologies, and in particular, the new technologies and skills that you know about. So let's say that these circles represent 2 new technologies that you know about. They may or may not overlap. That is, there may or may not be products and services out there today that use both of them. But you know both of those technologies, so you are among perhaps a relatively small group of people who could combine them. If those 2 circles are both new and growing, the overlap between them, if it even exists, will be small, but will be growing even faster than the 2 large circles. If you can meaningfully combine, oops, sorry, I jumped all the way to the end. If you can meaningfully combine a third, what am I doing? I guess it'll do it by itself. A third technology, the intersection of all 3 will be even smaller, but will be growing even faster. Those overlaps harbor particularly good opportunities for entrepreneurship. So those are just a few of the many ideas that are in Unleash Your Inner Company. The beauty of starting your own business is you don't need credentials, even though all of you have impressive credentials from University of San Francisco to Quito. You don't need permission. You just need to go out and do it. So go out there and have fun doing it. Thanks very much for having me. And now let's open it up to questions.
Can
Much time for you?
like 15 minutes?
15?
Yeah,
Okay.
not that much. But if
Are those questions on the screen? I can't quite read them.
We're checking right now.
Oh, okay.
okay, if not, can I ask the first one? Because I was I didn't have the chance this morning, and I was waiting for that. My question is why to be an entrepreneur? I mean, you are explaining. I mean, we are in a poor country, like almost poor, like Ecuador. There are people suffering. Why focus on starting a company and making profit for yourself? It's a tricky question.
It's what question?
A tricky question. I mean, it's not exactly what I do think, but it's something that the students were making. It's a question that the students were asking this morning. Is why start a company in a poor country when you should be worrying about the poor people and for them?
Well, I can't think of a better way to help poor people, because as you grow that business, you're going to need people to help you satisfy the customer need that you're satisfying. And so what if you can provide employment to them? Wouldn't that help them? Probably as part of working for you, they have to develop new skills. I would think that would be useful. They may be able to take the skills that they learn working for you and get an even better job with another company if they so choose to, and if you don't treat them right and continue to reward them for their efforts. So you're helping other people directly, and also you're coming up with a solution to human and customer needs that presumably is better, or at least different, than what the solutions that are currently out there, because if it weren't, no one would be buying your product and service. So you're, at the same time that you're generating profit for yourself and your business, you are satisfying a customer need for other people. That's a good thing. And in fact, as I see it, entrepreneurs are a uniquely ethical bunch. I don't think they're any more honest or less honest than people in other fields, but they are coming up with new solutions to unsatisfied customer needs that didn't exist before. And that makes the world a better place. So those are some thoughts. Maybe it's to your advantage to get some work experience first before starting your own business. As I mentioned in my book, it was not until I was in my late 30s that I started my first business. And of course, I had a lot of experience with other companies that helped me by doing it that way. And so that's something to think about. And in general, I think it's important to ask, where and what can I do that will add the most value to me personally, however I measure that the fastest. I know that for me, the single year of my life that I learned the most was the toughest year of my life, and that was 2001, the dot-com bust, the story I started out with. But I learned so much that year. That's the year that I feel, for the first time, I earned my executive stripes. So anyway, those are some thoughts. It's a good question. Thank you. Yes,
So I
ma'am.
have a question. So back, 4 years ago, I started my own business and it went like hell. Everything was wrong. I did it in a different country. I did it with my mom. It was a family business. But I know I did a lot of things wrong. I understand that, and now I see it and I'm like, okay, well, I messed up, right? But then my partner and the people who were in this together with me, they didn't know how to take this in a way that we can learn and do it better the next time. So my question here is, how do you deal with failure?
Well, as I say in the book, every time we try something, whether or not it succeeds or fails, we learn. Specifically, we learn whether or not whatever we were trying to accomplish could be accomplished with whatever resources we applied to it. If we succeed, we learn that it could be achieved. If we don't succeed, we learn that it couldn't succeed. And so every time we try something, we expand the space of what we know is or is not possible with a given set of resources. So the person who tries lots of things has it all over the person who never tries in the first place. Because the person who never tries never expands his or her knowledge of what can be achieved with a given set of resources. But by trying lots of things, you do. In fact, it may be that there's an optimal mix of successes and failures for each of us. Because think about it, if you have tried a whole bunch of things and you've succeeded every time, maybe that indicates that you're not stretching far enough and setting your goals high enough. If you failed every time, maybe that indicates that you need to set your goals more modestly next time and plan to apply more in the way of resources to achieving that goal than you did. So you can see how it may be there's an optimal mix of successes and failures. It'll be different for everybody to maximize your learning. As I say in the book, consider this. This is simple math. If the chances of success of your first company are, say, 35%, the chances of success of the second company are 65%, or let's say 60%. The chances of success of the third company are 70%, and the chances of the fourth company are 80%. Because each time you try in something, you learn more to increase the likelihood of success of the next company. Well, it turns out if you do the math, the chances that at least one of these four companies will succeed is about 98%. Because the chance that that not happening is 1 minus the probability that they'll all fail, and those probabilities get smaller quickly. So those are some thoughts on how to deal with failure. Well, one of the things I talk about in the book is scaling the customer need that you satisfy. I talk about it right up front, early on. You can scale it up or you can scale it down. Think of the bowling pin model. Instead of going after the first 3 bowling pins or the first 5 bowling pins, maybe just go after the first 1 or 2 bowling pins. Maybe you can even subdivide that bowling pin. Think about it. Let's say that the only person that you'll allow to clean your house is Maria. Maria doesn't have much in the way of skills other than house cleaning, but she has a competitive advantage, doesn't she? She's the only one you're going to allow to clean her house. Well, if Maria, that's because you know her, you trust her, etc. If Maria has a competitive advantage, so do you. You don't have to be a big Amazon or Microsoft or whoever to have a competitive advantage. It might be on a small scale. And initially, the need that you address has to match your resources, but every time you address a need successfully, you increase your resources because your resources include customers who are going to say good things about you, references and knowledge that you've gained, and that will grow over time. So good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Let me open that.
I see some things written up here. I'm putting on my glasses. If we have several business ideas, how can we choose one? Rodrigo, thank you for that wonderful question. I lay out a process in the book for choosing among different ideas. We developed the ideas in the earlier chapters of the book, and in the latter chapters, we assume that you're going to have multiple customer needs and solutions to those needs to choose from. And so you have to weigh them. It's something akin to a SWOT process. The opportunity, the risks, and weighing those, but it's in the toward the end of the book, there are chapters where we for each of the different opportunities, try to assess both how passionate we feel about those ideas and how strong our advantages are. And if you can imagine a 2x2 matrix, you want to choose the ideas that are in the upper right-hand corner, the ones for which you're both very passionate and the ones for which you have a strong advantage relative to others who might try to satisfy those needs. And, it may be ambiguous. Maybe they seem to be at about the same position, or maybe none of them are in the upper right corner. And then the book offers suggestions for what to do, how to become passionate, or how to improve your competitive advantage. Generally speaking, the more time we spend with an activity, the more it grows on us and the more passion we feel for it. And one of the things I caution against is don't put it up there high on the passion dimension if you're not really passionate about it, because that's just a recipe for failure. Now let's see, here's another question from Juan Pablo. Juan, how to manage passion for improvement and excellence in order to adapt to serve low maturity customers. Sometimes grit is not enough when you're forced to deliver mid-level solutions to customers. You'll feel that now is not your optimal timing or context, and your customers are not ready for your value proposition, even when you find a great market fit. Okay, so I think if I understand you correctly, Juan Pablo, you're saying maybe the customer doesn't realize the need that he or she has that you're planning on satisfying. And indeed, it may be necessary to educate the customer on the need. And of course, that's going to take time and effort and slow things down if you have to do that. So you want to factor that into choosing among several business ideas if you're going to have to do that for one or some of those ideas, but not others. One other thought on that is, can you identify a subset of the overall market where they do recognize the need they have? So it's not low maturity customers. Out of all of the customers, maybe overall they're low maturity, but there's a subset of them who realize the need and perhaps are financially able to pay for it. Maybe you can focus on them first, and maybe they're relatively price insensitive. And then as you serve them, gain experience, can streamline and automate the process delivery. You can expand your market, perhaps by bringing the price down and serve an ever larger market. I hear people complaining that billionaires are spending perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to go into space as tourists. What a waste of money that seems like. Well, I can't afford to go into space as a tourist, but I don't see it as a waste of money at all. The fact that those millionaires and billionaires are spending money to go into space means that the space tourism industry will eventually be able to perfect and automate and streamline and make safe enough that vacation in space that the price will eventually come down to where I can afford it too. So I welcome and thank those people for spending money on that. It's the same way with any product. The first digital cameras, the first cell phones were so expensive and bulky that only people who really needed them and were price insensitive could afford them. The first televisions were extremely expensive. Thank goodness there were wealthy people out there who could buy them so that they would eventually become affordable for the rest of us. If there are no wealthy people out there, then that dynamic just doesn't happen. Okay, Gardenia asks, how to go beyond my inner fear about starting my own business? Well, Gardenia, I'm with you. You know, it was not my original intention to start a business. As I mentioned, well, I don't know if I mentioned it in this class or not. I joke that I had a great advantage in starting my first business. I was fired from my previous job. I originally wasn't planning on starting a business. I was just looking for another job. And then I had a chance to do some consulting, made some money, I learned some things, and I went back to looking for a job again. Then had a chance to do more consulting. Did that, went back to looking for a job, more consulting, and then eventually I just forgot about looking for a job and I became a consultant. And that consulting practice is what I evolved my first software company out of. So maybe there's a step-by-step way you can do it that way too. Maybe you don't have to quit your full-time job to start your new business. Maybe there's a way to serve customers or to work on your product or service part-time or moonlighting while you're doing your job. And at some point, maybe you can reduce your full-time job to half-time so you can spend more time with the business and then that way move into it gradually. So those are some thoughts. Someone asked in the earlier session, how do I keep going and inspiring myself to keep going in spite of all the obstacles that you face? And you will face obstacles just like the ones I recited at the beginning of the talk. I find it's very helpful to keep a vision of what you want to accomplish and how you can see yourself and your company in the future. And it's okay if it's a self-serving vision initially. Maybe you envision your company being in a beautiful, gleaming office building. Or maybe you envision yourself talking to auditorium full of employees and inspiring them. Maybe, like me, you were fired from a previous job and by golly, you're going to show the guy who fired you that he made a mistake and you can be successful in spite of the fact that he fired you. Whatever the motivation is to get you started, it doesn't matter and I'm not concerned about it. But here's an important point. If the motivation, whatever it is, doesn't fairly quickly evolve into something positive and uplifting, it won't bring other people along with it. So take the case of customer sat. How can we evolve doing online customer satisfaction measurement into something that everyone can see makes the world a better place, that people want to be part of? Well, measuring and being able to take action quickly on customer feedback does make the world a better place for everyone, because all of us at some point in our daily lives serve the role as customer. And if we can be more satisfied as customers, if we don't have to wait as long, if we get a more reliable product, if we're served more courteously, whatever it is, that's going to improve our lives. So think about whatever you're doing, what is the way that it makes the world a better place so that other people will want to be part of the new venture you created? Okay. Those are all the questions on the screen as far as I can see.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it's easy to see that you have two very strong factors, passion and perseverance. And your methodology is strong too. I can see that you combine business, but also you have here the creativity. I remember you had a success in Italy, and also planning. Peter Drucker, Andy Grove, John Doerr, and even therapy, because we have two strange combinations here, passion and perseverance. Maybe it's time to be open to these fields in business, creativity, therapy, psychology, even phenomenology, to increase our business, our companies.
So I heard you say be open to creativity. Is it therapy? Did you say?
Not only creativity, but even therapy or psychology.
Is it therapy or psychology?
Yeah.
I do think there's a place for that. I mean, one very lightweight form of psychology that's used widely is Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs type indicator to see how you make decisions. And if, I think, I mentioned this in the book on the chapter about building and assembling a team. And if everybody on the team thinks the same way, you're not getting as much value out of that team as you could. And so if everybody on the team is an INTJ, an introvert, intuitive, thinking, judging individual, as so many of us software developers are, that team might benefit a lot by having one ESFP, extrovert, sensing, feeling, perceiving person who maybe is more sensitive to and attuned to relationships with other people than all those INTJs are, feels emotions more strongly and can factor those into the decision-making process. So those are some of the things to think about when you're assembling your team.
So let me take advantage and take another question.
Yeah.
As you know, in Ecuador, we have maybe more than 90% of companies that are familiar. And so would you add another factors in order to evolve and scale those kind of companies, the family companies?
90% of the companies in Ecuador are family companies.
Yeah.
Well, I always qualify the part about evolve and scale the business if you into a large business, if you want to, because not everybody wants to. I mean, obviously there are advantages to do it. You can have more global reach, you can build a bigger company, you can make more money, create an asset of greater value in the company. But it's hard. It might be a complete change in the business strategy from what you're currently doing. It might be very disruptive, and you have to weigh that against, is it worth that disruption, excuse me, with my family? And but I do emphasize, I do want to make the point, let's not forget that every single company, no matter how huge, McDonald's, Google, Amazon, IBM, you name it, started with a single customer. No company just came into existence automatically, full grown and mature and so forth. Everyone started just like your company has to start. So it is possible to grow into a large company, and the book lays out different techniques for doing that. And just be aware that it's an option that's available to you. It might be major surgery on the and majorly disruptive, and you have to decide whether you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Yep.
You close?
Yep. No, we don't have any more questions right now.
Okay.
So if you wanna.
You wanna close?
Okay, guys, thanks so much for having me. It's been great. I hope I don't wait until another 40 years before I. Best of luck to you.
Para todas las personas que nos acompañaron y que quieren volver a repetir la charla, la pueden revisar en nuestra página web en www.escueladeempresas.com, y muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado y por haber estado atentos a este espacio creado para ustedes. Que tengan una excelente tarde y muchas gracias.
Thank you,
Thank you
John.
so much, John.
My
It was
pleasure.
amazing. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. That was fun.
How are you?
Great.
Great.
Sleep well tonight.
I guess so. Right. Gracias.